my job was to work with communities regarding public tree issues. So I'm a technical assistance coordinator, so some of you in the room, actually maybe, well, I've worked with Nancy before, but did a lot of tree inventory work, did a lot of policy development, management plan development, and then last February we found emerald ash borer in central Vermont, and since then it's basically taken up like 80% of my job. It's a kind of relevant issue for towns right now, and really for towns, it's most important for towns to be engaged right now. So my hope is to give you a bunch of information, and for you to leave here, if you don't remember everything I say, at least have some nuggets that you can take back to your communities, and have a plan to make a plan, essentially. So my ideal future scenario, and I'm just going to say this up front, is that EAB is not a big deal for any of you. That is what I want. We know that the way that emerald ash borer has been impacting the other states is that it's about 10 years from the initial infestation when you start seeing the mass die-offs of trees. So right now, we're at this cusp, and in an ideal situation, our towns, our land managers, our homeowners that have ash trees make a plan now, and then when their ash trees are infested or impacted by the pest, they have a course of action, and so it doesn't end up being that big of a deal. That is my vision. We also know from how this has played out in other states that can't always be the case, and that this pest has already told over $12 billion in cost. It's been referred to as a slow-rolling natural disaster, and it will essentially wipe native ash trees off of the landscape in the U.S. So that's the sad message. But the message I'm hoping that we can leave here today with is that you as citizens in your communities can play a role in not only helping other people in your town know about this pest and what's coming down the pike, but more specifically helping your community leaders understand the importance of your town making a plan now and having a plan for when EAB actually comes to your community. So that's my spiel. Okay, everyone can leave now. I'm just kidding. So you already heard from Paige and Otis. So this meeting was set up. The Southern Windsor Regional Planning Commission and the Two Rivers Outreach Planning Commission asked me to come down. This is the 5th or 6th one of these I've done. Really trying to hit the areas of the state that have been are within the zone, our infested area or nearby. So you guys are not yet, but the flight season will start June 1, and we're likely to see a lot more infestations popping up this year. I just want to show you real quick, the two websites that I'm going to be referring to a lot today are, first and foremost, VT Invasives. Has anyone not heard of this site? Great. This is kind of the one-stop shop for not only pests, but water, aquatic, and plant invasive species. But there's a couple features on here I just want to make sure you know about. This one is really important. So this report it tool, that's where we want people to go if you think you see signs of EAB. So the state has limited resources and capacity to be going out and finding new, doing surveys, like cold surveys for EAB. So we're really depending on citizens still to help us identify trees that need to be looked at if you have a suspect pest. When you go to click this button, basically you say, hey, I found an insect, or I found signs of an insect. And then you come down here and you say, I think it's EAB. You click on that, and then it's going to give you some information about the pest. And if you still think you have it, you can either call this number or you can submit a photo. And we really find it's important to submit a photo because most of the time it's not EAB. So we can't be sending people around. So that's one really important thing for the folks in your town know that that's where they can go if they think they have the pest. And then the other thing to know is just this EAB updates page is where everything about emerald ash borer lives that the state is putting out. So we've got that map, which I've got printouts for you, and we're going to look at the slide in a little bit. There's this cool EAB update listserv. So that's the other thing I really want to make sure you are aware of. If you sign up for this listserv, the only time you're going to get an email is when there's a new infestation detected in the state. So there will not be press releases and big campaigns every single time we find a new infestation. Last year there was, but we know that it's going to start showing up and we might not be able to keep up with it and put those kinds of resources into doing these big public meetings every single time. So if you sign up for this listserv, as soon as the infestation is confirmed, you would just get a notice. So I really recommend you sign up for that. And then down here we have resources by topic, so how to identify EAB. We've got information on quarantines. We've got where the other states, where the infestations are in the other states. We've got all of these resources by landowner. So this is a really great website, and just to make sure you all know about it, I'm sure you've been here before. But today we're mostly talking about municipal planning. So this is my program's website, Vermont Urban Community Forestry, vtcommunityforestry.org. And if you go to resources and community preparedness, there's a whole section on emerald ash borer management. And again, most of these I printed out for you, so you'll take a copy home. But we've got all these resources. So there's a planning worksheet, there's an FAQ sheet, we have a whole web page about different ways to inventory your ash trees so you have an idea of what your vulnerability is. There's resources to the EAB cost calculator, information on insecticide use. So this is just another place for you to go, and we try to keep it as up to date as possible. But that's my primer on websites. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the story of EAB. For many of you, hopefully this is refresher information. Again, everybody in the room knows about the pests a little bit at least. This is not a life-size EAB. Thankfully, it was a volunteer. A volunteer up in Johnson made this costume for us, so we're able to use it for outreach events. It's really great to have. And I think it's also important to start off by just saying that we recognize that the story of EAB in Vermont is untold, and the story of EAB playing out in each one of your communities is yet to be told. So your strategies are going to vary based on many different factors. The size of your town, how many miles of road you have, how many ash trees you have. That's the biggest one. So your vulnerability to EAB, that's going to determine how you need to approach managing the pest. The political will to be proactive. Citizen engagement around natural resource and conservation. These are budgeting. It's a huge one. So these are all factors that allow us to be nimble and say, there's a spectrum of management options, and you need to decide where your town is going to fall on that spectrum. So a lot of what I'm presenting to you are just case studies of what different towns have done and are doing now, and then some general considerations around different management strategies. So EAB has been in the US since 2002, detected since 2002. It is likely that it was here in the 90s, but no one knew what it was. It first popped up outside of Detroit. It likely came across the Atlantic around the Great Lakes region through shipping material. It hails from northern China, Russia, Japan, North Korea. So it has Asian roots, and there was very little that was known about this pest before it became a big deal in the US. Why? Because in its native habitat, it's not a big deal. It is adapted to the ash species that are native to that area. There are natural predators. It's kept in check. There really just there's not really anyone who's ever studied it before it became an issue for our trees here. This is an EAB. sets of adults and larvae. You can see how big they are. Ogryllus planopenis is the Latin name. It's a really beautiful beetle, actually. Iridescent green. It's about ½ inch long. It's very small. And it feeds on all species of ash, Fraxinus. So any tree in the genus Fraxinus, this will feed on and kill. And it will kill 99.7% of untreated ash trees. So very, very little natural resistance on the landscape. We will talk about treatment, pesticide treatment in a little bit, but that's just, if left untreated, it will kill 99.7% of trees, and within 5 years of infestation. It can be in the tree 3 years before you see any visible signs of the pest, which means that there could basically be 2 seasons where you go from looking at a tree and say, oh, that looks like a healthy ash tree, to my tree is dead. It will kill the tree in a very short time frame. This is an important thing to think about when thinking of planning, because if you're seeing that decline to dead in a very short period of time for all of the trees at once, what does that mean for your resources and your capacity to manage that many dead trees at one time? The way that it kills the trees is not as an adult. So the adult does feed on the leaf. They eat the leaves of the trees. They're marginal feeders, so they feed from the outside in. What kills the tree is the larval stage. So when the eggs are laid on the bark in the late summer, the larvae burrow under the bark and essentially eat the cambial layer, which is the circulatory system of the tree. They feed on that as they grow. This is an image of those feeding galleries. So if there are many native bark beetles that you'll see similar markings. We get a lot of calls about elm, because the native elm bark beetles will, it's more like a starburst, so there's like a line and then just like squiggly lines coming out of it, like more of a straight line. The EAB feeding gallery is very distinct S-shaped curves. So they do these kind of like meanderings back and forth. But just a couple of EAB in a tree is not going to impact that tree too much, but as the population levels bump up, what's essentially happening is they're girdling, they're cutting off that circulatory system. So within a very short period of time, the tree is not able to transport water and nutrients from the crown back to the roots and so forth. This is the general life cycle, starting number 1. The female, so the flight season in Vermont was just changed. So the flight season is now June 1st to September 30th. The federal flight season starts May 1, but we know because of our climate that they're going to emerge a little later. So June 1 is the date. But so through the summer, the females and the males are out in the canopy, they're feeding. The females kind of saunter over to high branches, so they're feeding up top, and then so the infestation is going to start up at the top of the tree and move down. They'll lay up to 40 to 70 eggs on the tree. The eggs hatch, the larvae burrow underneath the bark. They will overwinter 1 to 2 years. When there's a lot of available cambia, they might overwinter for 2 years, but once the tree starts getting populated, it'll just be 1 year. That doesn't really matter to us, but just an interesting fact about them. And then they emerge from these D-shaped exit holes once they're ready to come out. So again, in Vermont, that's June through September is when we're going to be seeing them coming out.
Can you take a question?
Yeah.
The 40 to 70 eggs, are they microscopic?
You can't see them.
And how do they get from the bark to the female?
They burrow in. They hatch. So the shape of the ash bark is, has that deep groove. Right. So they lay the eggs right in there, and as they hatch, they just dig right in. They burrow right in. Not far, because it's right on. The cambial is just under the bark. Right. Yeah. So that's the general life cycle. We've been having people ask us, where can we go to see any public places where it's really obvious yet. Has anyone seen an infestation in any other states, like where? Michigan. Okay. How about you guys?
Concord, New Hampshire.
Concord, New Hampshire.
In Buffalo.
Buffalo. Okay. Yeah. So it's all, Michael?
Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania. Yeah. So it's all over if you're outside of Vermont. I went years ago down to Albany, in a rail yard outside Albany, during flight season, and it was a very dense stand of ash, and they were like mosquitoes. Like they were, you put your hand out and you grab them. Now we're like, oh, they're so novel. Like, what does it look like? But we're all gonna know what they look like sooner or later. These are some of the lookalikes we get. So this is the real EAB, but like I said, people call in. This is actually the six-spotted tiger beetle is the thing that we get the most. People say I have EAB, and this is what it is actually, which doesn't look too much like EAB, but kind of. So just to know that there are other pests on the landscape that do look like normal ash borer. Just quickly, yeah, Michael.
People could tell the tiger beetle apart easily because the head's wide.
Yeah.
That would be an easy one to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, like, when you go to report it, there's the first thing they say is like, here's all the lookalikes. So, do you have one of these really, or do you actually have an EAB? Walking through just the signs and symptoms. Who's first detector in here? Anyone? I think there's a couple. Okay. I can talk about that a little later, but the basic signs. The first thing that you're going to see visibly, obviously, on the tree is this woodpecker flecking. So woodpeckers go after the larvae. It's a shallow, so remember that the larvae is right under the bark. So this is not deep penetration into the heartwood of the tree. This is flecking. So they're basically flicking off parts of the bark and then extracting the pests. And before we go into the signs, also, this comes up every time we talk about ash. Ash struggle for a lot of reasons. If you look at ash trees, there's a lot of, we have ash yellows, we have the white fungus on the bark that you often see. The bark on ash flecks off pretty easily anyway, so if something rubs up against it, you might get something that looks like this. We often see ash growing on the roadsides, which is terrible growing conditions for trees, so they look kind of funky and not so healthy anyway. So it is really hard to see EAB signs and symptoms at this early stage, but we don't discourage you from looking. But this is likely how it's going to play out. Is the first thing you're going to see is this blonding, this flecking off of the bark. After that, because that circulatory system is being impacted, the upper canopy will start to die back. So if you're paying attention, if you have an individual tree you're looking at, you just pay attention to the density of the canopy over the growing season, and that dieback again happens pretty quickly. Bark splits. So as the larvae are tunneling, they're making these feeding galleries. The tree is going to send out its response to wounding, which is to put on wound wood around those wounds, which can basically make the bark crack open. So you might see bark splits on the tree. This epicormic sprouting, or water sprouts, might be another term you might know. Essentially, the tree, when it starts to get stressed out, needs to put out green because it has to feed itself, right? It's a photosynthesizing plant. So it will, if it can't get the water nutrients from out to the extremities and to its extremities, then it's going to try to put out green where it can, closer to the central leader. So you'll see this like dense sprouting happening. And the D-shaped exit holes. This is a great telltale sign. It's really hard to see. So I'm going to pass around a couple of bark samples. You can both see the D-shaped holes, but also if you flip it around, you can see those galleries. So I'll just pass again. Two of these around this way, a couple of these around this way. We used to really harp on looking for the D-shaped holes, but the reality is, as I mentioned before, the infestation is going to start in the upper canopy and move its way down. So by the time you can see a D-shaped hole at eye level or within your visible range, that tree has likely been infested And then the S-shaped galleries. So obviously this is not something that's visible without peeling the bark back or without a split in the bark, but this is the kind of telltale, oh yeah, that's EAB. In absence of an actual pest, this is the determining factor. So when we have a tree that we suspect has emerald ash borer, we'll look for all those other signs first, and if it's all positive, 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 the last thing we'll do is ask permission from the landowner to peel part of the bark back, and we'll start to look for these galleries. Any questions on signs? Just good to know about. So this is the density distribution of ash in the U.S. There are 16 native species of ash trees across North America. In Vermont, we have 3: green, white, and black. So black is mostly found in swamps, but green and white are distributed pretty broadly across our state. There are certain areas like Grand Isle County that has a lot of ash. Ash is also a species that grows, like I mentioned before, it grows well in disturbed soils. So roadside trees, we often have a lot of white ash and green ash that come up along our roadsides, which for municipality means you're more vulnerable to EAB. In Vermont, we estimate that ash makes up about 5 to 7%. So about 160 million trees in our native forests. But I focus on urban forestry in our more downtown areas. So we have information we've done over 35 inventories of like downtown regions. And so we can actually pull out the ash data and say, well man, for Hyde Park, they've got 4 ash trees in their public right of way in the village. Not a big deal for them. Whereas Burlington's dealing with 10% of their tree population, 1,275 trees. That's not in parks, that's just along streets. Williston in 2015 was 51% of their street trees were green ash. They have been preemptively removing those ash trees and replacing them over time. So that's not on rural roads, that's just the downtown, like the Taft Corner, if you've ever been up in Williston. That area was all green ash. Green ash was one of about 5 species that was planted after Dutch elm disease came through in the mid-century and wiped out our American elm population. So in addition to Norway maple, which is now an invasive species, green ash was really heavily planted in developments and neighborhoods, downtowns. It grows, it tolerates a wide variety of soil conditions. It grows fast. It's not messy. It provides a nice canopy. So it was selected as an ideal street tree. But now we should have learned our lesson after elm, and now we're kicking ourselves again. We should have learned our lesson that planting only 5 species in a community is a terrible idea. And though landscape architects often like the uniformity of having 1 species planted along the road, man, it is going to be an issue for South Burlington. Burlington, actually, there's one neighborhood near where I live that is 250 green ash monoculture, the whole neighborhood. And the city arborist approached the homeowners association and said, if this homeowners association wants to retain these trees, we can talk about a collaborative treatment effort. So we could treat these trees with insecticide. And the homeowners association came back and said, we know that this is not an ideal situation. We don't want to do that. So they're actually doing interplanting now. They're looking for places where they can plant new trees with the understanding that all of those ash trees are going to come out eventually. So we know that it's on the landscape, whether it's in a natural forest or in your community. You might have it planted around shopping plazas or in neighborhoods. These 2 down here, Northfield and Randolph, these are estimates that these communities have done rural roadside ash inventories, which I'm going to talk to you about, which would be a little bit probably more relevant to this crowd than the downtown street tree conversation. So the rural roadside, we know that there are some towns that just have a lot of ash along their right-of-way, along their rural right-of-way. Charlotte estimates that they have something upwards of 70 miles of road, and after after their initial efforts of inventorying their ash, they think they have about 38 trees per mile, ash trees per mile, which equates to almost 3,000 trees. So this is a good start, right, for planning. So you know you have a number, and then you can start to think about an action, course of action. Just to kind of quickly go through some ash ID, this actually is something that, as a person who has looked at thousands of ash trees, I often don't think about and have been reminded time and time again. This is actually where we need to start, as ash ID. The number one question county foresters are getting about EAD is, what does an ash tree look like? You can't begin to even understand your vulnerability until you know how many ash you have, but you can't tell how many ash you have until you know how to see an ash. So just some quick reminders about ash. And I'm actually going to skip this and just go straight to the photos. So, you know, the crown is depending on single stem versus if you have a multi-stem, it's a pretty open crown of the tree. On green ash, the foliage will be bright yellow in the fall. The red ash goes from kind of an orange to a maroon. I think it's actually easy. This is the easiest time to ID ash trees, in my opinion. The twigs, for me, are the real indicator. Whereas other species, like maple, your twigs taper in size as you go further out. The ash twigs pretty much stay stout the whole way out. So they're little stubby twigs. And they're opposite branching, which is the other big, easy way to identify. So much like a maple, the branches and the buds are directly across from each other on any given twig or stem, whereas most species are alternate. So you have, instead of across, you have bud here, bud here, bud here, bud here, bud here. So going back and forth of the branch. So that opposite, it's only really in our native trees, it's only maples and ashes and dogwoods are opposite, catalpa's opposite, but horse chestnut. Really in our forests, it's maple and ash. The bark is, people often use, I think it's actually kind of hard to look at bark if you don't really know what you're looking for, but diamonds, that's what you say, that it has a really distinct diamond-shaped pattern. The leaf is compound with anywhere between 5 to 9 leaflets, so actual leaves, and the seeds are kind of paddle-shaped, these paddle-shaped seeds. And they do have flowers. They're pretty inconspicuous, but these are the flowers of the ash. They're one of the first to flower out in the spring, and there's a couple of species that we often get confused with ash. The box elder is a big one. So box elder is a maple in the maple family. But this on this side, on all the slides, this is the actual ash, and then this is the box elder. The box elder, the leaf is compound, so it is somewhat easily confused. Box elder rarely grows straight and pretty, so that's one way that you're kind of able, if it's a gnarly looking tree, it's more likely a box elder than an ash. American mountain ash, we often get people that think that this is an ash. It's actually a sorghus, so it's a misnomer with the mountain ash. It's not in the Fraxinus genus, so it's not going to be impacted by EAD. I don't think the bark looks anything. This is more of an ornamental tree. It's not typically a large forest tree. Sometimes folks, black walnut is another one that's often confused. And sometimes the hickories. But if you've got like a shag bark, the bark is really, really obvious on a shag bark that it's not an ash.
I think bitter nut is fairly easy to confuse with.
Yeah, a bitternut grape, yep. But one of the ways that the leaves on the hickories are much more, they're compound, but they're rounded, whereas on the ash, it much more come to a point than having this kind of rounded simple leaf. We do get questions about, there is one other species that has been found to be impacted by EAB. It's the white fringe tree. It's Chionanthus is the genus. It's a small ornamental tree that is planted widely in the mid-Atlantic states. It's not cold hardy for our climate, so I actually don't know where there's any.
There's one more.
One in Windsor. So that is a tree that that they will infest. But again, it's not going to be the impact that you see with ash trees. So this is an important slide because this is from the Davie Institute of Tree Sciences, which they're based in Ohio, so they're kind of right at the heart of this. And a lot of the data that we have about how EAB is going to play out in communities, we're learning from the Davie Institute and the Midwestern universities, Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue. And it is worth saying that it's in 35 states now and 5 Canadian provinces. So there is a benefit to us we were the 33rd state last year. We have a wealth of experience from these other states, and we know how it's playing out there, and we can really learn from that. So this is what they're calling the EAB invasion wave. So essentially, once you get an infestation in an area, so let's take the islands, right? So South Hero, one of the confirmed infestations is in South Hero. We think that based on the condition of the trees that EAB was found in, was probably there 2 years, 2 to 3 years. So we can say, okay, in the island, we're like right here, we're still on the cusp. And we know after about year 8 to 10 is when the population levels of the pest are gonna really peak. They're gonna skyrocket. And so your density of pest is gonna peak at around year 10. And right behind that comes this wave of ash death, okay? So your population booms, and then the bulk of the trees are gonna die right after, if they're not treated, are gonna die after that. And so this death wave is kind of keeps extending, though the population levels are gonna start to go down because there's not as much food for them to feed upon. It also is worth saying that there was a thought at the beginning of EAB in the US that we were going to see it leave the landscape after it ran out of food. EAB has now been known it will feed on a tree that's 1 inch in diameter. So any root sprouts that are coming back after a tree's dead will be infested. So this is not a pest that we anticipate will go away. It's going to stay. It's going to be on our landscape at lower levels. It's not going to be, once most of the ash are dead, we'll have less to feed on it. So it will persist. It'll be here. So it's kind of like we gotta get used to this thing now. Yeah.
It hasn't jumped to anything else
No.
in these areas?
And I think if you look at like the distribution of ash based on and the counties that are infested right now, there's still, it's because ash is so widely distributed, I don't think it's feeling that kind of pressure yet. It'll fly up to 2 miles a year. It's a pest that will fly for food, so it's still being able to move to the next area and find. But this is a case for. There's a lot of research on parasitic wasps, so biocontrol. So in a heavily infested area, we're not seeing dramatic impact when you introduce some of these biocontrol options, but when we get down to lower levels, there is hope that at that point, when we're just trying to keep it kind of at bay, those biocontrols might have a little bit more success. Yeah.
Is that the Cirrus wasp?
Yeah. Well, no, the Cirrus is native. The Ceres is native, so that's a brown rolling wasp that will. But there are four parasitic wasps that are being used, like Concord, New Hampshire is using them. They're being actually introduced and released into areas. The state of Vermont is not yet doing that. One, you need to have actual like an infested area, and right now we're still at such low levels that they wouldn't be able to monitor how, how well they're doing. And the state also needs 40 acres of public land to do a test on, and we don't have that invested yet. But that is one research area that's being focused on right now.
How did they do that in Concord?
They've been doing it for a couple of years. Mike Parizio is one of the state's forest health specialists. He's based in Rutland. He actually did his grad school work on biocontrols for EAD. So if you ever get a chance to go to anything that Mike presents, he's got a lot of knowledge about those controls. So this is kind of a timeline just to reiterate the quickness. So you've got a healthy tree over here, and this is real research that's happening in the Midwest. Year 1 infested, you got a couple pests in there, still looks healthy. Still looks healthy at the end of the season. Year 2, you're starting to see some concentration of the EAD, and by the end of that second season, you're seeing see that die back, you see the discoloration of the foliage, the tree's stressed out. The third year of infestation, really starting to see that canopy die back, canopy loss. Year 4 and year 5, it's gone. So you might not have noticed this until the end of that second season, and then by the beginning of the 5th, the tree is no longer living. It is definitely worth noting that there is a very small bit of resistance and tolerance that's being exhibited by native ash trees. So I watched a really cool presentation on this a couple months ago, and so they use, this term is called lingering ash. So these are ash that are very rarely surviving, but more often showing some tolerance so that they actually survive maybe 5 years longer than all the other ones in the stand. There are some biophysical reactions that the trees are exhibiting that are much like what we see in the Asian native species. So one of those is the tree will essentially callus over the EAB larvae. So they'll basically prevent it from moving and kill it. Super rare occurrence, but that's one of the ways that the Asian varieties react to, healthy ash trees of the Asian varieties will react to an EAB infestation. So they're seeing between 0.1 and 1% of trees showing some tolerance or resistance in plots in the Midwest. And what they're doing with that information is the breeding programs. So they're basically finding those trees, taking cuttings, and crossbreeding with Asian varieties of ash to essentially breed our next generation of ash trees, much like we've done with the American elm hybrids. So those are already, and we've learned a lot from that process. So these are already in place. Those trees are growing, and there's a really, I don't have a slide on it, but there's a really cool project called the MoMA project, called monitoring something ash. Monitoring MoMA with ash. They're basically, it's a citizen science type of project. So basically they're asking landowners that know that they have ash on their property to do some monitoring once they know EAB is in an area, so that they're able to actually understand where these are. And then the Forest Service or whatever institution in your area might be doing a breeding program can come out and take cuttings of those trees. So this is a case for leaving trees standing, right? So the message is not cut everything down. The message is when you can, if you can, if the trees are not a threat to public safety, to infrastructure, if they're not trees that you need to cut down because you depend on them for economic reasons, if you're okay with leaving, if you have land and you're okay with leaving those trees standing, there's certainly a case for them to be allowed. Can we talk a little bit about the spread? Yes, Michael?
Two things. When the tree gets hit with the beetle, it's going to cost twice as much to remove it.
That's true.
So that should nudge.
Yeah, but if you have a woodlot that no one accesses but you, public trees need to be addressed. But this slide is all about in wooded areas where is no risk to public safety, there is a case to be made for leaving ash standing.
You may actually get to this point,
Yeah.
but it's fair to say that a tree without EAB is worth the money. Trees with EAB,
You make that decision.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but most people would like to recoup something from the river.
And that's their decision. But there are also people who don't feel that way. Who feel like we want to make habitat. So there are much more resources about if you're in the current use program, if you're in use value appraisal. That VT basic site has a whole section for landowners. This presentation is focused more, we'll get into planning for the municipalities and public trees. Yep.
At one of your other talks, I think they mentioned how some communities in Massachusetts are preemptively cutting their ash trees when they know there's an infestation.
Yep.
And then they're making the wood available to the public
Yep.
to make furniture and
Yeah.
bowls or firewood. So they're
Yeah.
not waiting until it becomes a hazard.
Yeah, Charlotte is preemptively removing trees this year. Rutland City will be preemptively removing trees. Enosburg is preemptively removing trees. Berlin plans to preemptively remove trees. Corinth is preemptively removing trees. It's going to happen in communities here. And our job is to collect those stories and put them up on our website with costs and details so that you can go back to whoever makes the decision about budget in your community and say, well, this town is doing this. Here's their plan, here's what it's costing them. So just to quickly harp on the spread, this is the most, well, maybe there's too much first, but this is basically where EAB is. Each red dot is a county in which the pest has been detected. As I mentioned, 35 states. It's obvious from this that it's moving not just naturally, right? So you have basically all of South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas EAB free, and then this one infestation in Colorado. So just looking at this map, we know that we are facilitating the movement of this pest. I heard, so EAB will travel on its own 1 to 2 miles a year, I mentioned that, and I heard somewhere that if the original infestation was in Detroit, it would have taken 400 years for it to get to New England naturally, but it took less than a decade. So we know that we are removing the pest. Here's a kind of flag. Go. No, I'm not gonna do it. Basically, they got it. But you can see the spread over time on this tool. And firewood is likely one of the main culprits, right? So if you remember where the larvae lives, where it grows, it's right underneath that bark. So it's really hard to see it in firewood. Ash is a great firewood. We know that people have camps. We know that people take firewood camping with them, despite the fact that we've had a firewood quarantine in Vermont since 2015. We know that there's a lot of wood that comes into our state that it goes unchecked from other states. This is actually just a colleague of mine. This is Salem, Massachusetts. Before Massachusetts had EAB, this was a wood-fired pizza place, downtown Salem. And he's a forester. He went up and was like, oh, let's just go see, and kind of kicks around the wood. And lo and behold, this is an EAB-infested piece of wood. He thinks that this is all heat-treated wood, so he doesn't think that this was like the origin of EAB in Massachusetts, but just goes to show how easy it is to be in a stack of pile of wood somewhere and move undetected. We have been doing many detection efforts for quite a while in the state. If you've ever seen a purple trap or a green trap coated in lore, have been hung by APHIS in our Agency of Agriculture. Funding for EAB has just gone down over the years, and it is anticipated deregulated as a federal pest. What that means is essentially we give up, it's too big of an issue, we can't put resources into it. There are other things that the federal government needs to focus on. We can't control this. So we know that our funding for projects like this, for the traps, is going to go away entirely. We're actually doing the traps this year, but we're doing it differently. We're asking for citizen volunteers to put up the traps and monitor them. So we will provide the traps, and then basically they just need to report over the course of the flight season to monitor those traps a couple times. If you're interested in that, let me know. They might have already cut out. They had extreme interest in this from the first detector network, so we know that I think 40 or 50 people have already said that they do it, which is great. This is what Michael was mentioning. This Cerceris wasp is a ground dwelling wasp that will feed on EAB, and the state has over the years done coordinated detection efforts, go hang out at baseball fields and find their nests and see what they're eating, basically. And we do trap trees, so basically go into an area, pick a tree to sacrifice, an ash tree to sacrifice, girdle that tree, it becomes super stressed out, and so it's more susceptible to infestation from all sorts of things, but EAB being one of them. At the end of the season, you cut that tree down, and you peel off all the bark looking for those galleries. We did this for years and never found anything, but that is one other way that the state tries to detect. We do a heck of a lot of outreach. So this is where we are right now with EAB in Vermont as of, April 16th, 2019. And just to go through and describe this map, the red circles, basically a known infestation. So where we know there is a tree that is infested is an epicenter. And this red circle goes out 5 miles beyond that epicenter. Beyond that, this yellow boundary is 5 miles outside of the edge of that area. So essentially, we're talking about what we're calling the infested area in Vermont is a 10-mile radius around a known infested tree. So our first infestation was found in Groton. A private consulting forester was on private landowner's land, walking through their management plan and noticed a grouping of trees and reported it to BT invasives, and lo and behold, that was our first confirmed infestation in the state. We had all of these pools about like where is it going to pop up first in Vermont. And we've got an infestation up in Quebec about 20 miles from the border. We know it's in Albany, we know it's down in northwestern Massachusetts, we know it's in the Concord area. We thought it was going to pop up along one of our major corridors at 91 or 89. Lo and behold, smack in the middle of the Groton. So that was our first infestation. Since then, Barrytown, Montpelier, Orange, Plainfield, South Hero, and Stamford are all towns in which we know there is a tree that is infested with EAB. In Montpelier, has anyone ever been to the National Life Building, the Agency of Natural Resources? So the tree is planted behind the parking lot at National Life, and our Forest Health lead was late to a meeting one day about EAB, and she pulled into the parking lot and parked and looked up and said, They brought the whole meeting outside and peeled the bark. Lo and behold, there were 3 infested trees at the Agency of Natural Resources. So that's actually the only place I can tell you to go if you want to see a tree that is likely infested. The next ash tree that was not cut down, yesterday I was there and it looks pretty bad. So I anticipate that tree has EAB. The Stamford infestation, we actually have not found any trees. It was 2 purple traps. So EABs were found on 2 purple traps in Stamford within a very short period of time. We sent all the Forest Health and the foresters in that area down to do our visual survey process, which is essentially driving every mile of every road in every town and looking at ash trees to see for the signs, and they couldn't find a tree. So yet we don't actually have a tree 2 actual casts. And then up in South Hero, a utility forester for Vermont Electric Co-op was camping at campground and knew what to look for and saw some cluster of trees. And so that was the South Hero detection. So that's where we are as of now. These are the towns where we know there is a tree that's infested. These are the towns that are within 5 miles of that tree. We have done outreach to all these communities to make sure that they know it's probably in their town. It's likely already there in these communities who just haven't seen it. And then these high-risk areas are the communities, again, that are just 5 miles outside of that red area, right? So these are the ones that it might be in those communities. What we're saying is if you're going to treat your trees, if you're going to have any trees you'd like to treat with insecticide, if you're within this 10-mile radius, that you should be doing it this year. So we don't know where it's going to pop up this year. I know that our state entomologist, Judy Rosofsky, has a list of like 15 suspect trees from all over the state that she has to go check on. So I just got one yesterday. A volunteer up in Georgia said, I'm positive this tree has EAB, so she adds it to her list, and then she goes, Judy's generally the one that goes and checks on the trees. So Vermont's approach has been very collaborative. I work for, of course, Parks and Rec. Our EAB group is made up of folks from UVM Extension, from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Markets, from the Forest Service, and from APHIS. We decided as a state not to adopt a statewide quarantine. So New Hampshire, when they had their first infestation, they decided to go county by county, actually enacting a quarantine by county. So that would restrict the movement of wood, ash wood, and material from that county. We know that most states that have adopted that system ended up putting too many resources into it, and it was spreading anyway. So Vermont decided not. We are in the federal quarantine. We did not adopt a state quarantine, but we do have a whole slew of slow the spread recommendations. So what we're really trying to do is make sure people are aware of the pests, make sure they're aware of where it is, and make sure that they're thoughtfully moving any ash wood in a way that would slow the spread of the pest. And so in your packets, I have there's 5 fact sheets, and they're also all on that website. But these basically give recommendations. They're not legally binding. They're not requirements. They're very much recommendations that we'll hope people will adhere to. And the 5 that I have in here are, so ash processing options is one of them. So if you want to treat, if you want to move ash wood, here's heat treatment. If you're trying to move ash lumber during the flight season, here's the safe way to do it. The second one is on when moving ash from the infested area, flight season versus non-flight season. For tree care and cleaning, so if you have an arborist that's working on your trees, if they're removing ash wood, pieces of ash wood, what should they do? Transporting ash wood products illegally, and then for forest landowners is the last one. So you'll get these, but they're all on the website, and really the state is really trying to just focus on slow spread. Let's keep it moving from place to place as slowly as possible. One thing just to note that in the federal quarantine, there are specific guidelines around chipping, but for the purposes of the state of Vermont, any chipping is considered treated. So this is particularly of interest, I guess, to tree care companies, because a lot of the times they chip wood up to like 20 inches if they're removing stuff. So that's actually considered treated and can move kind of freely in and out of the infested area. Okay, so we're at 5, and maybe we'll take like a 5-minute break, and then I just want to move into actual planning strategies for municipalities. So we're going to be talking about public trees. Trees on your public right-of-ways, trees on public property, around your libraries, your town halls, your village greens. Those are the trees we're focusing on. and rural road trees. So let's take 5 minutes, go get a snack, take a stretch, and we'll be back. Service where we get most of our funding for special projects like EEB, and it ranked super low. And I think honestly, we're the 33rd state that's dealt with this. The people that make decisions about where money goes to from the Forest Service are looking at EEB, and they know there's other things on the horizon like spotted lanternfly, which if you haven't heard of, it's the next one that's coming down the pike. So unfortunately, there right now are not a lot of grant opportunities for this. We really recommend that towns think about incorporating this into your town's hazard mitigation plans. So if that's something that your town might be working on, we are looking at FEMA dollars for this. So as a state organization, just understand that we are also trying to find grant money to be able to assist municipalities with training, with making sure that trees that are coming down are coming down safely, because we know road crews are going to be doing a lot of this work. And we'll talk about that a little later.
There's a lot that a town can do that doesn't really cost anything. That one of the most important things when you're doing a tree.
It's an inventory. Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll talk about that.
But that wouldn't depend on the grant or anything.
No, that wouldn't come in a grant. No. So right, there's a lot of planning process, but when it comes down to the actual removal of trees or treatment of trees, the municipalities are going to bear that responsibility. I will also say up front that state roads, the state will deal with, so agency transportation, so you don't need to worry. There will be a plan that comes out, and the utility companies also are in the process of writing their EAD plans. So they are well aware of this issue. We actually convened the major utility companies last June and brought a utility forester from National Grid, they are operating in Western New York and have been dealing with EAD for 8 years. He's scared the pants off those utility people, and I know that all of them are working on their plans right now. So that's just being upfront that I'm really talking about for you guys to think about your municipalities, the trees that they are responsible for. And then I already said this at the beginning, but I'll just say it again. The ideal scenario is that EAD is not a big deal for your town, but in order for that to be the case, you're going to have to do some planning and some work ahead of the assessment. So one of the sheets that I have in your packet is a one-pager just called Basic Approaches to Management of EAD. So I'm going to talk through these 3 different approaches, but just to kind of give you, I'm going to speckle some like case studies about what's happening in Vermont throughout this presentation, and we'll kind of sum up with any that I missed in the talk. This is that neighborhood in Burlington where they're doing interplanting. They're in 2 weekends, they are going to put 100 trees in with volunteers in between these ash trees. So I'll be there with my 18-month-old. Probably not going to plant a lot of trees, but we'll get some soil eaten and stuff like that. But so that's one strategy that they're South Burlington also has been doing this for years, just looking for places where they can plant in between ash that they know they're not going to treat those trees, they're going to eventually remove them. So that's just one strategy. That's a really preemptive strategy, right? Like we're talking, they've been thinking about this for a long time. They have the strategy in place. They have been growing the trees in their nurseries to go out into the field.
What are they planting?
Burlington, I think he's got like 10 different species that he's pulling. Burlington has a tree nursery. They grow like 400 trees up there, and there's like 70 species. So I'm going to talk about Burlington because they have a lot of examples. I know that that's not a community that you can very readily like compare to, but just to give some examples of what's happening in Vermont. So this is a demonstration of a tree injection. So this was a scientist with Department of Agriculture, Federal Department of Agriculture, that we brought up last year to talk to arborists about the different options for treatment. So this is what they call systemic trunk injection. We as a state are only recommending 2 chemicals to be used for EAD, and you have in your packet there is handout with those 2 chemicals, and methylbenzoate and azaractin. The mouthful to say, it took me a long time to get the names right, but I got them now. There are other options out there that are bark sprays or foliar sprays or soil drenches that you're injecting into the ground opposed to directly into the tree. And we do not recommend those because of the residual impacts of those chemicals. We know that in Vermont, there are a lot of people that are really sensitive to the idea of injecting insecticides or using pesticides, and we're sensitive to that as well. But also recognizing that if you have a high-value tree that you want to retain, that is your only option. Unless it happens to be that 0.1% of a tree that is tolerant or resistant. If you want to take that chance, that's up to you. But we do just want to provide an option for trees that are high value. So,
do you have a like dollar per DVH?
yep, I'll get there. I have a budget page.
However, isn't it also, treating a tree is really fooling yourself? Because if you treat this tree and don't do it the next year or the year after,
It's a long-term commitment.
it's something that you've got to do continually.
It's every other year.
So
Well,
you're fooling yourself by treating the tree. You're
No.
not really putting anything on.
No, it's actually, if you look at the cost per diameter, particularly if you have a tree, a large diameter ash tree that is planted in an area near utility lines, around a house, your arborist might give you a quote that's going to cost $3,000 to remove that tree. If the cost of that treatment, it's about $12 per diameter inch every other year. So if you do the math, that you're basically, if you have, let's say it's a 20-inch tree, it's at $12 per diameter inch, $240 every other year for the life of that tree. You're making a decision there. Is it cheaper to remove the tree and plant something else there in its place, or does the tree have value enough that I'm going to make that commitment and it's going to continue to provide benefits over its life? It's up to individuals. I think these are more conversations with homeowners, like if we're talking about individual trees. For municipalities, there's a conversation there too. So is it worth them treating the trees instead of removing them all and replacing them? And are the people in town going to be receptive to that treatment? So Rutland City is treating 100 of their ash trees and then removing the rest. So they actually are getting, their 2 arborist staff are becoming certified pesticide applicators. So their cost goes down to $3 per diameter inch per tree because they're buying the chemical direct and they're applying it themselves. They're not hiring someone to do it. I don't know, Montpelier is treating 15 of its downtown trees because they're the only trees in the downtown. And they're planted in, these little pits, and they can't do interplanting because they're sidewalk there. So they want to retain that canopy downtown. It's the only shade they have downtown. So they're going to be treating those 15 trees. Williston's treating 6 that are historic trees around the library. So, community to community, it's based on what the long-term vision is. Are you able to make that commitment? So that's another very preemptive type of activity. So again, if you're within that 10-mile radius, this year we're recommending you start treatment. You can treat once the tree is infested at low levels, but once you start seeing the canopy die back, it's likely going to be too late. We really don't want people going on Amazon and looking up EAB bug spray, because it exists. So part of why I want to just make sure you're aware of what's available, even if you don't want to deal with it, is so if people in town are looking for information about treatment, they know where to go. And so your Conservation Commission can play a really important role in just directing them to our website with that correct information. We only recommend that a certified arborist and someone who is certified as a pesticide applicator applies that chemical, because the dosage is really important with a lot of these. And the systemic trunk injection, again, is going directly into the trunk, and it's moving upward through the tree. And it's a non-neonicotinoid is the term. So it has the least impact on pollinators possible of insecticide.
What kind of certification, what should the town look for?
Yep. So in order to apply the chemicals that are registered in Vermont, the emamectin, benzoate, and the azadirachtin, you have to be certified pesticide applicator in ornamental and shade tree. It's category, it's on the sheet in your packet.
That's a state.
You have to take the core, you have to take the core pesticide exam, and you have to take category 3A, which is ornamental and shade tree.
What happens if the town gets someone to apply it who isn't certified?
Then technically the Agency of Agriculture can intervene if someone reports it, but they should be. And we also recommend they're a certified arborist. That's the other piece of it, which is the International Society of Arboriculture maintains the certified arborist credential. There's a great website called treesaregood.org, and there's a database so you can say, hey, look at Vermont, show me all of the certified arborists within 10 miles of my zip code. And that it'll pop up a list. Not all certified arborists will choose to offer the service of treatment, but many of them will, because they know there's going to be a lot of homeowners asking for treatment of trees. I just ran in at anyone go to the flower show this year? No, it's far. There's a gentleman who just relocated his business here from New York for treating trees. He is a certified arborist, so he's legit, but it's just interesting. He's the first person I've met is like kind of like following this around, because I know for private landowners, that's where the real request for this is. I don't think a lot of towns are going to do it. And I just want to tell the story while we're talking about pesticide application. Another really important role that your community, that you as members of respective boards can play is making sure people know where to go to get that information. I've heard from the Midwest that we're going to get these predator companies that like come in and just prey on the fear of particularly elderly residents and say, we got to cut all your trees down. And I said, that's not going to happen in Vermont. I know of a homeowner in Charlotte that paid an arborist $5,000 to treat 5 of her box elder trees for total scam. I just read, there was another article yesterday that came out from a community in Minnesota that is like 100 miles from the nearest infestation, and there was an arborist company going door to door telling people that EAB was about to kill their trees and that they needed to remove them immediately. So it could happen in your community, so again, just making sure people know where to go to get the right information. You may even want to go so far as to contacting your local arborists and just making sure that their credentials are up to speed, or people know how to find those reputable local practitioners. This is the third scenario that I'm just throwing up here. This is a community in Connecticut. These are all dead ash trees that are along their rural road. I put this up here to demonstrate the far end of the management spectrum, which is the no action or delayed reaction. There's not really an option to do nothing. These trees are either going to fall in the road or where they are and need to be cleaned up if they don't, impact a car passing by or a pedestrian or whatever. The town will have to do something because they're going to fall eventually. So they're along this spectrum. We talk about preemptive on one side, you're doing things way ahead of time, you're eliminating the risk before it's even an issue, all the way down to the other edge, which is this delayed or reactive management. And this is all in that handout, but just kind of further elucidating what we're talking about with each of these strategies. The preemptive, I think that really important piece is that your risk threshold is so low that you just want to deal with it before it's here, and you want to, or you want to be way ahead of the game. There might be a really high upfront cost of this. So I mentioned Williston earlier that there were 51% of their street trees were ash in 2015. 2019, they're down to about 20%. So they have been removing these trees and replacing them the last 4 years. So while that cost was high for their public works department to do that, once EAB is in Williston, they will likely have 0% of their street trees are ash. So they're eliminating the risk and the issue before it's there. based on capacity, essentially. So you might be spending energy focusing on monitoring. So this is something that Montpelier is really focusing on. They have a really active tree board, and they're focusing a lot of their efforts on, they know that it's there, it's in Montpelier, it's at the National Life Building. They want to focus on being able to know how it's moving throughout their community over time by heavily monitoring. So doing branch sampling, doing trap trees. They are implementing strategies in, there's a technique called SLAM, which stands for Slowing Ash Mortality. It's not like a science-proven guidebook, but it's a list of strategies basically focused on monitoring, so you're slowing the spread over time of pests. This strategy might take the form of doing removals over time and replacements. This insecticide treatment piece, there are communities that are using treatment as kind of a stopgap. So they know that they're going to remove 1,200 trees, and they only have capacity to remove about 100 a year. So if the infestation comes to their community, maybe they choose to treat a bulk of those trees to basically fend off the pest for a couple of years while they start to remove the other trees. So these are, again, the treatment stuff is much more for our downtowns and not really appropriate for rural roads. Certainly, we don't expect any towns to treat trees along rural roads unless it's super high value and has really high cultural significance for some reason. But this could also be being strategic. So this might be more something you would consider. You know, do you want to focus your efforts on your most traveled roads first? Do you want to focus your efforts on being strategic about integrating with the plan that your road crew already, their vegetation management plan that's already in place? So there is some strategy thinking about what is going to be the path of least resistance that we're able to kind of tackle this over time. And the goal of this, the selective management, is about spreading costs out over time. That's why we're really, these towns that are thinking about doing preemptive removals, like Charlotte. So again, I mentioned they're doing preemptive rural road removals. We have an example on our website of the RFP that they put out for that removal. So that's an example. It's the first rural town road that I know of that has went through an actual process, opposed to the road crews just going back and removing some trees. So they're taking 1 mile of road this year. Basically, they know it's heavily infested, or it's heavily ash, has a lot of ash on it. So they're saying, we have X amount of dollars this year to put towards this. You know, there's a lot of ash in this spot. We're going to focus and do this removal this year. So next year they might say, we also know that this road is super, super heavily ashed. So they're spreading their costs and the work out over time. That's what they're trying to do there. And then a delayed reaction management style is the no control. So you really, again, you're following the past, you're following the infestation, you're reacting to what's happening, whether that be responding to calls of homeowners that say, there's a dead tree, you gotta come get it, or cleaning up when the trees start falling, and hopefully not having any injuries or property damage in the process.
So I don't know a whole lot about tree removal. When they remove these trees, is the stump removed as well?
On rural roads, likely not.
Not, okay.
If your street trees, your downtown trees, they would likely be friends. And I'll talk about, I have price estimates for removals as well. But so the ash inventory piece is really important. So we talked, Weathersfield has done an inventory. Any other towns have any inventory, ash inventory at all? Any idea?
We did a little bit of counting, just
Okay.
to get a sense of how many trees.
Yep. So, it's kind of the first step. Well, second step. Ash ID is the first step. Second step is knowing what your vulnerability is. So this is, again, a strategic effort to just get a number, to better understand how many ash trees you're dealing with in the right of way. We have options on our website, and then there are plenty of creative options that we've seen towns employ that are beyond the scope of what we have up on our website. just say, we want one number. And say, you know, we have a volunteer crew of 2 people. We want to spend 3 hours maximum. We're going to drive roads, X amount of roads, tally how many ash we see, and extrapolate that out to how many miles of road to get an estimate. That's like the path of least resistance. This doesn't have to be a huge effort, right? Or you could say, we want to have a GIS database of every single ash tree along our rural roads that's plotted, and we want to have that data. So there's a spectrum here too, right? Depending on how many people want to be involved, what the goal of the inventory is it to get a single number, or is it to have a database? Is it somewhere in between? Do you just want to have an idea of density? So there were a couple towns in Franklin County, Bakersfield, Enosburg, Franklin, that they did ash density on roads. So they basically took, you know, half-mile segments of their most traveled roads and had ended up doing like a color-coded map based on the density of ash they found within that. So that could guide management decisions about EAD. It's also important to think about what's the end use of any data you collect. So is your town, is your road crew, is the road crew in your town going to be the one that ends up dealing with the ash trees, or do you think your town might take a route of passing a budget for EAD, writing an RFP, contracting someone else to come in and remove these trees? There's a big difference there. Who's managing the data? Is it Public Works, road crews, or is it your Conservation Commission? Are you working with your Regional Planning Commission to help you do mapping? Lots of questions to answer. So when I work with a town that's ready to start thinking about inventory, if they want help, I have kind of a worksheet we work through, and that's the first thing is just deciding what the goal is and how the data is going to be used. Then we can start thinking about the protocol and how we want to actually collect the data. This, what I'm showing you, is we use an app on iPads and smartphones that's free, so anyone can download it. So I was just at the mountain school in Berkshire with the students there, and they all have iPhones, and we downloaded the app, and we use the state's account so they can log in and access the actual data field collection tool. And they're out in the field this weekend, every Saturday, walking along all the rural roads and collecting the data for the town. So this is Corinth, and basically what they've chosen to do with this tool is inventory every single ash tree on the rural roads. And the ones that are red are the ones that they're going to remove this year, and the ones that are green are the ones they're not going to remove this year. And they decided what their protocol is for making that determination. We don't tell them that, but that's how they use it. And the next year, they'll go in and they delete all the ones that have been removed, and they start to convert some of the green ones to red. And so over time, they're dealing with their ash resource.
Do you have suggestions on what the criteria may be for today's approach?
Well, so I know that they chose to do only inventoried ash trees over 6 inches in diameter. And the ones that are red were either in poor condition or leaning over the road. But another town might choose something entirely different as their criteria. I definitely suggest thinking about the relationship between who's going to actually remove the trees. So if it's road crew, and if they're just incorporating into their work plan, up to what size tree do they feel comfortable removing? And what might be needed to be contracted out. Maybe you're only inventorying trees that are too big for your road. So it's definitely not prescriptive, and I will also say, this is all new to us. The rural roadside is this like Wild West that no one at the state has really paid that much attention to. But if you think about it, it's like the forest that most people have the most interaction with, because it's what you're driving by every day. So it's this new, like, we're focusing a lot of effort because we know that this is where it's going to impact for a lot of towns is in the rural right-of-way. But we have 8 towns that are doing this right now. this tool to each square doesn't have to represent a tree. It could be that you decide we're gonna walk every quarter mile and plot one point and just tally and put a number in that point of how many trees, ash trees we tallied along that half mile. So you can use the tool, it's really flexible, and you can use it for trails. ArcGIS collector is what that is. But, so this is all just to say, inventory, reach out if you want to talk about it. We also have paper data collection sheet samples, so this is all like way up here, and you're like, I don't even know what GIS is. You know, if your road crew would laugh at you if you handed them a database in Microsoft Excel, then you just want a paper data sheet, we have those as options as well. Let me skip that one and go to so these are just some estimates that hopefully can help guide. Removals are really hard to estimate. I went through a process of calling arborists in the state to ask them what the range is for removal of a tree, and I got this: $155 to $3,500 per tree. And that's mostly talking about landscape trees, right? So yard trees, or again, the rural right-of-way is this kind of murky territory where we don't necessarily have like best practices for what is most efficient and cost-effective for doing like bulk removals of trees at one time. The Forest Service gives this estimate $18.33 per diameter inch. I think for an arborist, it often depends on the density. So they'll look at an area and say, how much am I traveling? How far is the wood going to go? How big are the trees? So that's one thing I recommend, particularly if you're going to be contracting anything out, at least get the size estimate. So the diameter of the tree and the location is good for them to have.
The other variables are how the methodology for removal.
Yep.
You have structures nearby and the trees taken apart from the top.
Yep.
versus
Are you spelling it?
Right.
Are they needing to climb the tree? Do you have to bring a crane in? Is it on a slope? There's a lot of variables here. So one thing that I will say with a lot of data to back it up is that Michael already mentioned a dead tree is much more expensive to remove than a live tree. The national tree care companies like Aspen, Bartlett, Davey, which do operate in Vermont, they will no longer allow their workers to climb ash trees in the winter when they can't see how much of the canopy is alive. And if it's in the summer and it's less than 40% canopy, they will not let their workers climb those trees, which means to remove a large ash tree, they have to bring in a crane or a lift, which is much more expensive. These trees desiccate really fast once they're impacted by EAV, and they are not safe to climb in. And they are very brittle and they shatter. So I just watched this really informative and quite terrifying webinar about the data they're doing on the wood strength of ash trees that have been impacted by EAD. After 1 year of infestation, and remember, you might not see the signs until 3 years, they recommend that you treat a 5-inch limb like a 1-inch limb, strength-wise. That's a big difference. They are now doing these really interesting experiments around with using acoustics to detect level of decay and strength of wood. So you might have seen people with a mallet walking around a tree and banging. That's an old school way, but these are actual instruments that are attached to trees that have been impacted by EAD. And the quote that I remember very well is that after 5 years, when a tree is dead or close to death by EAD, the strength of the wood was akin to a styrofoam cup. So it's one of the things that we're really thinking about when I said we're trying to get funding from FEMA and from the Forest Service for EAD. What I'm most concerned about is training road crews on safely working with ash. Because we know that for most towns, they're going to fall on the road crews to do a lot of this removal. And it's just really important for them to know they don't behave like other trees. An elm that, even if it's been when they hit the ground. So that's another cost, is the time it takes to clean up. Whereas with another species, you might be able to drop a branch, pick it up, throw it in the chipper. These, when they fall, they shatter and splinter. So it's not a matter of picking pieces up and putting them in the chipper. It's a matter of sweeping splinters of wood. So that's the main point, is that it's a lot cheaper to remove a live tree than a dead tree. And that's just something to consider, and a lot safer to remove a live tree than a dead tree. The stump grinding, this is, again, if you want to put something back where that tree was, it can be up to 125 to 250 per tree. Replacement plantings, which again, on the rural roadside, I don't expect a lot of towns to put effort into replacement tree plantings unless you are worried about invasives coming in, which is a whole other topic, what happens when the ash trees are gone. But this is the treatment piece is the one you might be interested in. Again, on the low end, $3 per diameter inch if you have someone in-house that can apply those pesticides, up to $13 per inch for treatment. And this is, this is based on talking with 5 or 6 arborists in the state that are going to be applying pesticides or offering that. So if you talk to someone and they give you a quote of $25 per inch, you say, I'm going to call somebody else, because this is pretty much across the board what you should be seeing around $13. And the last thing I'll say about budgeting is just think about when it might be an appropriate time to ask your town for some funding for this. I will say this year, I don't know of a single town that asked for funding for EAB that was not passed. And that's not to say that these are towns that thought they were going to, Brookfield, it's only $2,000 for preemptive removals, but they asked for it and they got it. The town of Middlebury, for the last 3 years, has put aside $5,000 into an EAB fund. They're not doing any preemptive removals, but they have that money, that $15,000 now, that's in the fund, that is managed by their tree committee, that when EAB comes to Middlebury, they will have that at their disposal to use. Essex Junction, I think 5,000, Charlotte 10,000, Montpelier, their ask this year was their plan, and I don't know that they got full funding for it, but I know the plan passed. But the budget request was $289,000 for year 1, $83,000 for the next 9 years. That's what they estimate it's going to cost in Montpelier. That is also, they want to buy a portable sawmill, and they are setting up, the city of Montpelier is setting up a marshaling yard so that people can have their ash wood sent to this marshaling yard. They want to bucket up for firewood and give it to people in town to use for firewood. So that's one way that they're thinking strategically about how to use the wood. We already talked about insecticides, so I won't spend much time on this, but just again to reiterate that you have to be certified, that you can find arborists on this great website. In your packet you have all this information, and that we're really only recommending these 2 products that are both non-neonicotinoids. I talked about this already. Ash failed differently. They're super brittle. And we don't know what's going to happen with our ice storms, right? So that's another consideration. We don't know how that's going to play out. So once trees start dying, we're going to see much more down wood with much less force, basically. I talked about utilities, so they all have plans. They're working on plans. Green Mountain Power has 11,000 miles of road with lines along it. The utility right-of-way changes based on the utility, so I can't tell you one standard, but essentially, they're going to manage ash trees that could impact their lines. So that is one consideration if you're conducting an inventory, is whether or not you're going to inventory the trees on the side of the road with the power lines. It could cut your work in half, basically. This is one thing that we heard from the utilities when we met with them last June, and I didn't know that wood ferries existed, but these are folks that follow the utilities along, and when they cut wood down, they load it up in the back of their car and drive off with it. So this is one way that EAB is likely going to move. There is a precedent in Vermont that the town has the management rights in the right-of-way, and that's usually 3 rods, so it's usually 25 feet from center line on any road. But the landowner actually owns the land and owns the tree, so when a tree's cut down on the rural right-of-way, it is courtesy, it is standard practice that you leave it for the landowner. There is a conversation that should be had about if that's just what you're going to do with the ash trees. We found out from Charlotte when they put out that RFP, their arborist came back and said, well, if you let us take the wood, it's going to be a lot cheaper. We can cut that price of the removal substantially. So is it worth having a conversation with the landowner and saying, how many of you actually would take the wood if we left it versus if you let us have it and we can give it to the contractor and then it's going to cost less money to do the work. That's also a conversation about wood ferries, right? So if you ask the landowner, do you want this wood? And they say, no, I don't want it, then maybe the town can take it somewhere to a marshalling yard to be available for people for firewood. If the landowner doesn't want the wood, then it's not going to be left there and available for someone else to take. Just things to think about. So that disposal and utilization question, is there a second life for the ash wood? Is it just being cut down? I think as far as the responsibility of the municipality in that duty of care to protect public safety, once it's on the ground, you could say we've done our due diligence there and we don't have the capacity to do anything else. But there are lots of things, as Michael mentioned, in the Midwest that have come out of the excess of available ash wood. Giving it to local artisans to have some value-added products. If it's a large tree that has a history, can you do something with that wood and make a park bench out of it? So work with a tech school, right? Like that's another thing. We've talked to some towns that have tech schools. Is this an opportunity to give the wood to kids to be doing educational projects and learning how to do woodworking? So lots of options, yeah.
I think a lot of these, everybody here is from rural town.
Yeah.
You're going to be educated flabbergasted at the amount of wood that's in those town records.
Yeah.
And I think one thing you might want to consider is, especially for trees that are 14, 16 inches and larger, trying to salvage those trees and see if you can talk to the local loggers or local mills. There isn't enough artists or person makers in New England
Yeah.
to begin to take care of this wood.
Yeah.
But if you can talk to a mill or a logger and maybe have some of the bigger logs moved to a concentration yard, the thought of having a logger remove those trees standing is not going to happen because you don't have the insurance.
Yep.
But if they can move the log to a concentration area and have a trucker or somebody pick them up, the one thing you need to be aware of is the bottom 5 feet, 95 times out of 100 has got wire that you're going to have to leave that. But
Yeah, that's a great idea. And one thing I didn't mention that, so we have a couple of town collaboratives that have popped up out of this. So the 5 towns in Grand Isle County, and then there's a group in Lamoille County that's made up of about 8 towns that are actively meeting to talk about regional approaches. And wood utilization is one of their, and disposal is one of their major conversation topics. So can we have one yard where all these towns can kind of come together and bring all their wood? Can we share resources in other ways. For rural towns, I think that's a really great method if you've got like the political will and the will of the people to come together and think through some of these things that could end up saving towns a lot of money and resources. But those are great ideas, and I think the two other things real quick with disposal is one, composters. So to make compost, you need carbon and you need vegetation, right? So they're looking for, the large composting facilities on the site are looking for compost, for carbon, which is wood, essentially. So there is a map now on VT bases of all of the waste disposal yards and composting sites that will accept ash wood as chips.
So another thing that's going to impact this disposal and utilization is that we might be talking in our roadways in Heartland about 3,500 trees, but there's 160 million trees that are not on the roadway that other people are going to be looking for. How are we going to dispose and utilize?
Yeah.
So it's only a small slice of the picture that we're seeing.
Right.
Is the rent have a plan for the trees that they're moving?
No, you guys should talk.
Are you just going to leave them there?
Sorry, that is right now. That's the plan because that's how it's always been done. But I know also from talking with road crews and Stu Johnson, who runs the local roads program, that it's a big headache when they cut wood and leave it, and then the landowner doesn't take it, and it's just left there because the next time they come to mow, the next time they have to build a culvert or whatnot, it's there. And if you think about 3,000 trees coming down and just lying in that right of way, so I think there's definitely a conversation around like interaction with the landowner. Yes or no, do you want it? If not, is there some other purpose it can serve, whether it be to bring the cost down in some way or just to be taken somewhere else?
Because there is a large composting facility in Vermont.
There you go. Yeah, I don't know that Steve knows, like he obviously must know that, but yeah. Okay, policies, I just want to note, we have a legislation called the Tree Warden Statutes that the tree wardens in the room should at least know a little bit about. The last time it was touched was 1969. It's very outdated. There are no definitions. Basically gives, it gives power to an individual that's deemed as a tree warden to make the call whether or not trees in the right-of-way should be removed. It's a little wonky, for lack of a better term, in the rural areas because it doesn't define what's a residential area or not. So it says the tree warden is in charge of all trees in residential area, but does that mean downtown or does that mean on a rural right-of-way? And there's a whole process that has to happen when any tree that's not a hazard is taken down. It's supposed to be a public process. Long story short, look at your ordinances in your community. Is there anything pertaining to trees? Is there anything pertaining to the relationship between the town and private landowners? So if you have a tree on private property that's leaning over public property, it gets invested with EAB. What's the protocol there? How does that get resolved? The tree warden statutes have some language around that. They say the town can have that tree removed, but it also says the town will pay for it. So there are communities in the state that have gone a step further and developed their own tree wardens or tree ordinances that that lay that out a little bit clearer in light of EAB and the issues that it could bring up in the next couple of years. So looking at your public policies and your ordinances is a good idea. And then just this conversation about private property owners. There's information that property owners need to know about, how to identify an ash, what their options are. But there's also, are there strategies that you can think of as a group, as a town, to help to assist landowners in making those management decisions? I have heard of insurance companies in Ohio, home insurers, that send cease and desist letters to homeowners that say, we know you have an ash tree within 15 feet of your house. If you don't remove that ash tree within X amount of days, we will no longer insure your home. It's a liability. So making sure people are aware that they're going to have to do something if those trees are in conflict with infrastructure and could cause public safety concerns. I don't know if that's going to happen in Vermont, but it has happened elsewhere. So, in my last minute, we've got a ton of resources. You've got a bunch of them in your packet. We've got worksheets, we've got FAQs, we've got sample Emerald Ash Borer management plans on our website. So if you want to see an example of what another town has written up and what they're planning on doing, as those come rolling in to me, whenever I know someone passed one, their select board passed one, or someone wrote one, I ask for them. So there's probably about 20 of those that are up on our website, of communities of all shapes and sizes. So you think about what town is like yours, look at their plan, maybe you want to do something similar. We've got, these are the two websites, we already talked about those. Got a ton of outreach and education resources on our website. There are these narrated PowerPoints, so if you want to give a talk on EAB in your library, we have a PowerPoint ready for you that has notes in it, so you can just read the notes and give the presentation, make people aware, spread the word, help us out, because it's really hard. I'm basically one of like 4 people that is doing these types of presentations across the state, so it's hard for us to be everywhere. So we want to empower you as well. And geez, I think I talked about all these towns, but this is the tree warden in Charlotte. Last week, actually, he wrote up this whole spiel about EAB and the town's approach and what they call themselves the Tree Tribe of Charlotte. It's a group of citizens that have been working on this and what their plan is. And you obviously can't read it, but it's on the Charlotte News website. So if you're a tree warden, consider getting in your local paper. Maybe you have a column, maybe you have a regular type of just update, advice for landowners. And I am right on 6 o'clock. Hopefully it's not a big deal, right? You guys got it all under control. And I'll stick around for a couple minutes if you guys have questions, but we're here as a resource. I really appreciate that you're all here and gave up your sunny afternoon to listen about Emerald Ash Borer, and let us know how we can help. And also let us know what works for you or what doesn't. I think that's what I'm hoping that our program can really do is, again, have information from what other towns are doing available so that we can all learn from each other and we can make the best decision for the story of EAB in Vermont. So, thank you.